Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, I'll be reviewing the campaign book Lobediggol and the Lich Queen, designed by Christopher Michael Thompson for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, you can reach out to me via email, Twitter, or Discord, or my submission form at roguewatson.com. If you enjoy the content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. This is going to be one of the more challenging reviews that I think I've done on the channel because this was a difficult book to get through, I think, and because it's a rare review where I think I have more negative things to say than positive. Still hopefully constructive criticism, as always. So according to the store page, this is a campaign book, and by the looks of the cover, we're dealing with a Gith versus Illithid storyline, which is cool, right? And I don't even know too much. I mean, I guess I've been playing 5e since its inception, but I don't have the years and decades of knowledge. But I know surface level about the Gith and the Illithids and their hated rivalry, and one enslaved the other, and neither of them are particularly good people. So that could be a cool backdrop for a full campaign. Unfortunately, this book is more interested in providing a bunch of quests. At least this is meant to be, from what I can understand, like part one of a multi-part series, I believe. Although the PDF was given to me in two different chunks, but I think that was just to save space. The whole thing is about 150 pages, which is pretty big for like the first part of a campaign story. Unfortunately, it's really more of a collection of quests than it is a full like campaign story, and it was really difficult for me to even understand how the story goes. The whole thing is in desperate need of an editor. It's very wordy, and it's got the the standard layout that works well, and it's got good presentation, but the way the designer used subheadings was very fast and loose, to where I even struggled to determine where certain quests began and ended, and then what was a main quest, what was a side quest. It was just very difficult to actually read and understand. And I am somebody who has read and reviewed a lot of products now over the years I've been doing this on the channel. So I've come to see a lot of different formats and types, and like to think that I can get through a lot of PDFs and understand everything. But this one was one of the most challenging products that I've had to get through, because it was just needlessly complicated to try to understand. It is in desperate need of, at the very least, some kind of adventure flow chart or summary or synopsis. I mean, you've got this background here, but it really just dives into the lore, which the ratio of lore to adventure is also way too heavy. I get the feeling, I don't know if this wanted to be more of a source book than a more standard adventure, like a setting, and it's all set around the Dasaran Valley. So you could even couch it as maybe a sequel or an additional expansion to like Princes of the Apocalypse or Storm King's Thunder, or even coming off of Lost Mine of Fendelver, since you're right there next to the Dasaran Valley. Like, all of the different quests and things take place around that area. So and there's a lot of good quests here. There's probably over a dozen of these pretty meaty side quests, if I can kind of read you through some of them. And they don't even start until page 40, which that's a kind of a minor quibble. I do have other adventure books that also, they don't start the actual adventure till later. I find that really annoying. In fact, I have Empire of the Ghouls here, which I'm running for our current Patreon D&D game, and it does the same thing. It has its whole Gazetteer section at the very beginning, even though you don't even need that information until much later in the game. and the actual adventure summary doesn't start until page 48, which is nuts, and I hate that. But it does have an adventure summary that goes through like, hey, here's what happens in each chapter. It's like just a few paragraphs, and it's very clear about what's going on and how that pertains to the overall story. This one just doesn't have nearly enough. Module follows a 3-act structure basis, and then it kind of explains. Basically, what it tries to do is what Rime of the Frost Maiden did in its opening chapter, which is to say, hey, the party just needs to do quests before they can be a high enough level to do the actual main story, which actually a lot of 5e adventures probably work like that, to be fair. Like, they don't actually, they might start 1 through 12, but you basically do little bullshit things, defeat the rats in the cellar or something until you become slightly higher level. Rime, I think that worked okay because it's all about ingrading into 10 towns and learning that area, and a few of the quests do pertain to, the wider plot line. But even then, it's designed to like pick and choose, and it was just organized very easily because it was like, hey, here's the one quest in this town, here's the one quest in this town. It was pretty easy to parse and understand. This one gives you no such organizational structure. It just kind of plays fast and loose with throwing a bunch of encounters at you and then a bunch of quests in different areas. Some of them have to do with the main plot line, and others are just kind of randomly put there. But at least they have some interesting things going on. So one of them is you might help move a bunch of bodies following a battle and getting through a kobold-infested cave. Another one is you're investigating missing deep gnomes beneath the Barge Right Inn. There was one where you're solving this kind of weird, macabre riddle/puzzle involving a zombie. You could survive a monster-infested minecart ride with Zentarum, I think it was. You can race friendly goblin scouts. I can tell the designer had a lot of really cool ideas that were mashed in here, but I feel like this almost would have been better suited for maybe like not even an encounters book, because they're bigger than encounters. And when I say meaty side quests, I mean these are like this one. And here's the other problem with so you can see like the format the designer used here. The beginning of the side quests is, I don't know if you can see my cursor. I think it's barely. This is on the right side of the screen. Crime of the Cadaver Composer is actually the beginning of a side quest, and it continues for all these pages, I believe, until you get to Wounded One. But you can see how there's like big subheadings here where it's like John the Indomitable Justice Guard is like, okay, wait, is that another side quest? Like, I got really confused. And again, I've reviewed a lot of I think I've seen a lot of formats, but this is the first time I've seen it where there's so many different subheadings and things where it's really tricky to see like what all is part of a single side quest. And these side quests are not like a page or two. These are like 4 or 5 pages. Like, they're humongous little mini side quest adventures. And as I mentioned, there's over a dozen of these, I believe, just in tier 1, and then tier 2, I think, is when or chapter 2, I forget how they organize it, is when it finally starts in with the actual adventure crawl. So it's a little tricky to understand and get through, but I think what the designer was going for was something like Chapter 1 from Rime of the Frost Maiden, where it's like, hey, these are a bunch of quests the player characters need to get through in their early stages. But and there's some interesting ideas here, but I just failed to see where the overarching plot structure was. There was like maybe 1 or 2 that even the inciting incident, which is back on page like 20, I think, which is weird. Yeah, inciting incident, which is the beginning of a quest, even though it's not done in the same heading as the other ones, which is confusing, is just like a random encounter, a bunch of GIF. Like, it's so bizarre. Like, there's a whole map of Beliard, and it's all numbered. I don't know why that one is particularly looked at. Like, it's very possible I missed the thread in here, but if I'm missing the thread, then the average person is very much going to miss the thread, because I think it's just way too wordy. It's too much. There was also a weird formatting issue. I'm not going to ding the product for this, but I don't know if you can even see it too well on my screen. But like, for some reason, it's very low resolution for me, to where I had to blow it up. Usually I review it on this setting, which is the default, like I think it's like 78% or something. For literally the hundreds of reviews I've done, I do this same format and zoom setting, whatever. And this one I could not do that with, because it was sent at such a low resolution. And I worked with the designer. We tried to get a different copy and use Google Drive and all these things, and for some reason just never quite fixed itself. I'm assuming that's maybe on my end or something to do with the sending it to me was a problem, and I assume this is not going to actually be a problem on the store, so I'm not going to ding it for that. But it was annoying to have to zoom it up to like 125% before I could even try and read through it, and then that resulted in some of the maps kind of being. I do like the effort of giving me full color maps, but obviously they're all kind of different formats and colors, and some have details and some don't. Some are annotated and some don't. It's a little bit like, I'm glad you did it. At least gave me something, but it's obviously not VTT ready, I guess I should say. And then the actual campaign starts here on page like 120, I feel like, where we enter tier 2. And by the way, there hasn't been any level range. I have not stated a level range in this campaign, which is another problem I feel like this campaign book has, is it leaves too much up to the DM. I forgot to write down specific page numbers where it did this, where I could cite as evidence, but throughout a lot of these adventures, it literally says, hey, you, the DM, need to decide like what level we're doing this at and what the player motivations are, and be sure to tie it into your player backstories and things. It really irritates me when and this isn't the first designer to do that, when a designer basically takes a step back and says, hey, DM who's reading this, it's your job to really make this adventure. Well, no shit. Like, yes, obviously, a DM or GM is going to take the adventure and make it their own. That's kind of, you don't really need to say that, even though a lot of designers do say that as kind of a reminder. But it irritates me specifically because it feels like you're not putting in that extra effort to give me that content, to give me that information, to give me why the players care. Even though I know as a DM I can make those adjustments and changes, and if one of my players has is a Gith or something, like obviously yes, that's going to tie in different ways. But you, the designer, if you are writing an adventure, then you need to give me as much of that information and content as I can to work with. And then I will make the adjustments on my own. And it really just over and over and over again, I saw a lot of these quests and areas where it was like the designer was just taking a back seat and saying, okay, and then here's where you need to really make this work. There was, what was it? I'm trying to remember one of them. I think it was during the racing scene or something, where it was like, hey, you need to make this race fun or something like that. And I was just like, my jaw hung open. I was like, what? It's like, no, you need to make this race fun. You're designing it for me. Now, if I look at it and say, well, here's how I would make it more fun, then I will do that. But it's your job to design the thing that you're doing. So that was really just rubbed me the wrong way, and very much an annoyance of me. And again, this is not the first designer to do that, but I found it particularly egregious here because a lot of these adventures and side quests tended to leave a lot of information, including the level range, which that's, I get not everybody's doing milestone leveling. You don't have to like literally do it like that, but you need to give me some kind of range here. And it's just kind of mildly suggested that they start at like, again, that tier 1, and then, hey, here's the tier 2. So I guess this is very much an open, more sandboxy adventure, which is just not what I vibe with for the most part. I really tend to like more railroady adventures. I know that gets to be kind of a 4-letter word for a lot of DMs, but I don't know. And for my live stream player group, it works very well anyway. I think they prefer, and playing on a VTT, I think that also I lean towards having all the pre-scripted stuff ready and everything. And that just works better for my group. So for me, I prefer, if we're looking at one end of the needle being pure open world sandbox, the players can do whatever they want, to like a linear railroad experience where they're going one thing after another. I'm not going to go all the way over to that one, but the needle is pointed pretty far in that direction. And that's how when I'm reviewing an adventure, I'm looking at saying, okay, where is the through line? Now, that doesn't mean literally everything has to come one after the other. You can have splitting, branching paths. You can have player choices. What I really like, I talk about how different campaigns kind of expand and contract, which is a really great game design tool. Basically, there are certain areas where you may need, like the main quest may be, hey, you need to go get these 3 items, MacGuffins, or even just legitimate powerful items that can go defeat the villain. And then it's up to the players to decide, okay, which of these three do we go do next? And maybe the order will determine like which kind of allies we have or what levels we are and all that. That allows the narrative to expand and open up and give the player some choices and things. And then maybe once you have all those three, you have to figure out like where the villain's lair is. And then once you go into the villain's lair, now you contract, because now you've got this like sequence of events that happen pretty linearly. And I think, again, Rime of the Frost Maiden, especially the way that I modified it, I think worked pretty well as an expanding and contracting adventure, where there were some open world areas, especially using the first 2 chapters, which you can sprinkle in later, and then some that really close it up and have it be like, okay, your next quest through line is going to be at this one, next area that you're going to. This one just felt a little too open-ended, and I just didn't see where that narrative through line was. Like the main quest basically is you're going, at some point you just go down into the Underdark, and you've got some allies in tow, which you've made hopefully during that first tier, and there's just no real steps to it. You basically just waltz into the main Illithid city, you battle your way inside, and you defeat an Elder Brain, and then the adventure keeps going. And I was confused. Okay, I remember in the beginning there was something about this Elder Brain that got like split into 2 different halves, and you end up defeating the one half, and then you have to go after, I guess, the second half, which involves more Underdark shenanigans, including building this kind of cool mammoth Trojan horse sequence, which seemed pretty fun. And then you have to go defeat like a 3rd Elder Brain for some reason. Like I couldn't figure out how the main quest worked, what all was involved in the main quest. It was just lost on me. And again, this is 150 pages. A lot of it's quests, and a lot of it's very tricky to see where things start and stop. So I think I'm just at this kind of point repeating the general problems I had with it, and it's in need of a layout editor, first of all, which isn't to say, I mean, it looks like a professional design, but once you actually start reading through it, that's when it gets really confusing. So that part needs to be fixed. And then also just a normal written editor, because there was a lot of places that, I don't know, the designer gets a little fast and loose with going on like some rants or tangents, or kind of goes back into talking about like game design in general, that maybe those should have been like sidebars or something. So I also found that a little bit jarring. Again, not the first designer to do that, but it happens a bit frequently. And one thing I skipped over that's in the very beginning, which I would have put probably this in an appendix, but I would have, again, I prefer when you start off with the adventure and then you do all the other stuff kind of at the end. It includes new player content, which actually probably ends up being some of the best content in this book. We get 5. This is weird. 5 player races, but one of them is already available, and I guess there was some kind of collaboration deal that was with bringing the Saurian race into this book, but apparently that's available on its a separate product as well. But the other 4, I think, are new, originally added to this adventure. I don't know if any of them specifically have anything to do with the plot line so much. I don't know. I mean, these characters do show up at some point, but it's just, I guess Ariane could be maybe in the Underdark. Corinth are shadow people. Ariane are like were-spider people. Corinth are shadow people. Charkarians are the shark people. Not quite Sawagans, though. And then Feyre are like the tiefling version of elves. So they're kind of elf demon hybrids. All of them felt pretty cool. They all had interesting abilities. Maybe some of them were a little overpowered, but I thought they were all kind of had interesting things going on them. And then they all have their own backgrounds, which is kind of nifty, because you're such a unique player race, ancestry, whichever, and you get some cool, unique, trait spawns and flaws and all that if you end up going with that kind of character. So I thought that was pretty cool, and ends up being probably one of the more interesting aspects of this book. That's kind of in the middle of just a whole bunch of lore about, factions and what's going on, that I found just too densely packed, and I was really interested in getting to the adventure part of it, and I just felt like it was lost. And by the time I got to the adventure, I was so overwhelmed with trying to figure out all these different quests and information and the relevance there that I had a real struggle to try to understand what this campaign book was doing. And maybe this should have been designed as more of a source book or a setting book, or a mini quest adventure book. Or maybe the problem is I'm only seeing a part of the whole puzzle, but at the very least, I mean, it still needed to have some kind of editing structure to it. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for Lobediggol and the Lich Queen. Pro, over a dozen meaty side quests around the Dasaran Valley, so the ones that are there, which I went over very briefly, but I do think there's some good content in here. It still needs editing, but and if you can figure out, again, where one begins and ends, I think it's pretty cool that you can, and a lot of these are just drop-in, pretty big quests that are larger than a lot of side quests that I've seen from other adventures. And the other pro is that the new player races and backgrounds. I think those are all pretty much a thumbs up. They were interesting ideas. They sounded cool. And I like that they all got their own backgrounds attached to them. So that was pretty nifty. The cons, probably the biggest con is a lack of adventure flowchart, adventure synopsis, some kind of summary that really just broke it down for me to where it was like, all right, here's what happens first. Here's what happens next. I really need something like that to let me understand what's going on, especially if your adventure is this fucking long. Like, I'm going to need something to follow along with that kind of sums it all up for me. Another con is it's just too open-ended when it comes to locations, level ranges, player motivations, even in some case game mechanics. As I mentioned, that was just a pet peeve of mine whenever the DM just mentions like, hey, you need to do this, this, and this because you're the DM and that's your job. Like, yeah, I know, but you need to also design the things. So please don't leave too much stuff up for the person actually trying to run your adventure. And then the other big con is it's just too confusing of a layout, the way it's structured with specifically, I think the subheadings is what really throws me. That it was a real challenge for me. Like, sometimes there's numbers, and then sometimes there's these headings, and then sometimes there's nothing like that. Very, very confusing the way this thing is organized and set up, and it unfortunately exacerbated the problem where I didn't know, the main quest situation, how to tell where things, began and ended, and where this, I was literally reading one, and was like, I think it was the moving the bodies one, and you got to the Kobold Mine. I'm like, wait, is this a separate adventure? And I waited until I got to like the NPC. I was like, no, wait, that NPC was in a different one. Like, it was just, I have not experienced a reading challenge like that before until this one. All right, final verdict. Lobediggol and the Lich Queen teases an epic Mind Flayer versus Gith campaign, but its confusing layout, dense lore, and lack of structure leave it little more than a collection of meandering quests in desperate need of an editor. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brandon, Genocider, David, Eclectic Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Brian, Corey, Go at 1337, Big Nut, John, Scott, Gene, Eric, Tyler, Nathan, Camp Crystal Lake, Counselor, Big Ship, Andrew, Gerald, the Relrun, Matt, Captain Woody, 79, and Matthew, and gold patrons RPG, Paper Crowns, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Nathan, Thaz, Tortoise, Scott, Refus, Carolyn, William, Jerry, and Tom. Thank you all very much for your support.